feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Actually, they were still in Kansas. The color portion of the movie takes place entirely in Dorothy's head after she was knocked unconscious during a tornado. And spoilers for the following Scooby-Doo film.
'Cause it's terror time again. They've got you running through the night.
The 4 direct-to-video Scooby-Doo movies I'm about to discuss are frequently referred to by the fandom as the Mook films, due to the Japanese studio that animated them. However, I refer to them as the Scooby-Doo Renaissance. What do I mean by that? The word Renaissance itself is French for rebirth, and it's most famously used when describing the revival of art and literature in Europe between the 14th and 16th centuries, after a millennium of the Dark Ages. However, it's also frequently used to describe the period of time when any given setting experiences a sharp increase in quality, whether talking about societies in general or advances in media. We're about to get into a lot of opinions here, particularly mine, and I want to preface what I'm about to say with a disclaimer that just because I do or do not like something doesn't mean it's inherently good or bad. If you saw the trashy anime I enjoy, you'd appreciate that my taste in entertainment is certainly no standard by which to condemn others. These are just my feelings on the subject, and I don't judge anyone by what they enjoy watching. Mostly. While the new Scooby-Doo movies marked a decrease in the quality of the franchise, it was the period that followed the Scooby-Doo Show of the late 1970s that really showed a heavy decline. The 1980s begat the Scrappy era and finished with a pup named Scooby-Doo, which was one of the lowest points of all. This era also introduced the 3 Red Shirt Shaggy movies that didn't do the franchise any favors. Most of the 1990s was a drought in Scooby media, with no series in production and just one animated film, Scooby-Doo and Arabian Nights, which was more or less a vehicle to showcase other Hanna-Barbera characters in stories bookended by Shaggy and Scooby shenanigans. These 2 decades were definitely the dark ages of the Scooby-Dooverse.
Get ready for Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, because this time the monsters are real. Now on video from Warner Brothers Family Entertainment.
This all changed with the 1998 release of Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. The film was heavily marketed at the time, and much of the hype was focused on its more mature themes and how the monsters were real. They even had a tie-in with Wendy's. I remember seeing the Zombie Island promotional materials on the drive-thru menu at the one in my town. The first film was made with little studio input, which is a nice way of saying the creators were able to make a movie with no interference by clueless executives, and what they came up with revitalized the entire franchise. After all this time, Scooby-Doo was back and better than ever, and the success of this release led to 3 more over the subsequent 3 years, followed by What's New Scooby-Doo and the first live-action film in 2002. A Scooby series or direct-to-video release has been in constant production almost every year since. The 4 films of the Scooby-Doo Renaissance may not be the sole reason the franchise is as popular as it is today, but Zombie Island, Witch's Ghost, Alien Invaders, and Cyber Chase indisputably played a significant part in its revival. Now in their early to mid-20s, the members of Mystery Inc. have gone their separate ways, with Daphne and Fred hosting and producing a syndicated TV show, Velma running her own mystery-themed bookshop, and Shaggy and Scooby working for Customs in what can be inferred as the latest in a string of unsuccessful jobs. Bored with their teenage years spent solving mystery after mystery involving fake ghosts and monsters, Daphne is determined to find evidence of real supernatural activity for her show, so the gang reunite to resume their search for the unexplained, only to keep running into the same old crooks in cosplay. While stopping for lunch in New Orleans, what appears to be a young woman overhears Daphne's complaints about failing to find any actual ghosts. Promising a real haunting, she invites the gang to her employer's mansion on nearby Moonscar Island, notorious for its history of unexplained disappearances. This is not the first video I've done about Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, but my previous one focused primarily on the body count of the villains in the episode and not the quality of the design, outfits, or operation of their scheme. While I'll try not to go over the same material twice, it may still be necessary occasionally to maintain the flow of this one. Incidentally, if I say anything here that is contradicted or explained differently in Return to Zombie Island, don't worry about it, because that film does not take place in the same universe as this one. It honestly shouldn't even belong in the same universe as we do. Simone Lenoir and Lena Dupree are the sole permanent residents of Moonscar Island, a bayou location just outside New Orleans known for its hot peppers and pirate history. The two of them are hiding a shocking secret. They are centuries-old worshippers of a cat god cursed to feed on the life force of others to maintain their immortality.
Sometimes it became necessary for Lena to lure outsiders back to the island.
Just like you lured us.
I've had years of practice.
They must secure victims once a year during a ceremony held on the harvest moon. In years past, settlers and other visitors would come to the island, providing a source for their feeding. But as time went on, Simone and Lena found it necessary to leave the island to secure victims. Granting him the immortality provided by their curse, they also managed to secure the aid of a local ferryman, Jacques. Sadly, as much as I love this film, the premise itself is hardly unique. Much of it parallels the popular Dracula mythos, with an aristocrat hiding a secret curse of immortality, their need to feed on innocent human victims, loyal servants, a large mansion replacing the typical castle setting, and animal transformations. Dracula was known for assuming the shape of a bat or a wolf, while Simone, Lena, and Jacques transformed into violent cat creatures. Setting aside the lack of originality, Simone and Lena's design is still excellent. They chose an isolated setting which would not only help keep their crime secret, but also afford any number of places to dispose of their victims' remains.
Come on, Scoob! Now's our chance!
Those zombies are just the poor souls you drained.
In any other scheme, that'd be enough because most corpses don't reanimate to chase their killers or try to warn off any future victims. Immortality is certainly a worthy reward for a criminal endeavor, setting aside the morality of murdering people to achieve it. Living forever absolutely tops art forgery, swindling land to resell to the government, or revenge for not getting cast as the lead in a film. F***ing Carl the Stuntman.
You won't get away with this!
I've been getting away with it for 200 years.
Simone and Lena's scheme was obviously effective, as they had not been caught in over 2 centuries, not to mention the sheer number of victims' bodies scattered all over Moonscar Island. They get a 4 out of 5 for their design. This may have been just another retelling of Dracula, but you can't argue with their success. The villains this time around weren't wearing any disguises, so their outfit score is pretty much already decided. More superhuman strength from a man in a monster suit. I wish this guy was around whenever I try ripping open a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos. Yes, Zombie Island did technically feature a few bad guys wearing costumes. In fact, it opened with the gang solving a typical Scooby-Doo mystery involving a cosplaying crook. However, this was just a flashback and had nothing to do with Simone and Lena. For that same reason, the series of unmaskings in the montage of the gang exposing fake monsters before they arrived in New Orleans cannot be a factor in the outfit rating. In addition, despite all the supernatural shenanigans on Moonscar Island being real, not only have zombies already been prominently featured in previous Scooby-Doo episodes, cat creatures have also appeared several times before and after. There is a way, technically, to look at Simone and Lena as wearing disguises, but it's not one I prefer. For most of his existence, Batman has always been thought of as Bruce Wayne the billionaire dressing up as a superhero to fight crime. However, as more modern takes often consider the psychology behind Batman's motivations, it's been asked whether Bruce Wayne is disguising himself as Batman, or if Batman is the one pretending to be an effete billionaire. Did Bruce Wayne in truth die the moment his parents were murdered, and ever since then he's just been a creature of vengeance, merely putting on the trappings of civilization? Should Simone and Lena be viewed the same way?
We uttered a curse on the pirates to destroy them as they had destroyed our island. Our wish was granted.
Once they evoked the cat god's curse, did the young women they once were become completely engulfed by the cat creatures they are now? Were they only ever their true selves during the Harvest Moon ceremony and merely hiding in plain sight the rest of the year? As I said, I'm not personally a fan of the idea of an alter ego supplanting the original personality, so as far as I'm concerned, Simone, Lena, and Jacques were just human beings under a curse. As they weren't wearing disguises, their outfit score would normally be a neutral 2.5 out of 5. But I'm bumping it up to a 3 out of 5 because of how cool the transformations are.
I am happy to see y'all.
I know why they did it, but it's still funny how Jacques' transformation ripped most of the front of his shirt off, but Simone and Lena's blouses were still mostly intact. As mentioned, I already did a video that went into detail regarding much of Simone and Lena's operation of their immortality scheme, so at the risk of retreading familiar territory, let's hit the main points. By the time the Scooby Gang arrived, once every harvest moon, Lena would presumably venture off the island to con any number of people to return with her to the mansion so she, Simone, and Jacques could feast on their life force. Lena was essentially the Guillermo to Simone's Nandor, except in this situation, she was also a vampire and not merely having the promise of immortality used as bait. Previously, the cat creatures would rely on settlers and other visitors to the island as their food supply, but it's likely as rumors spread about unexplained disappearances, the flow of people voluntarily going to the island likely dried up. It also makes me wonder what Simone and Lena did before the pepper plantation was started and their mansion was built. For the rest of the year, did they just hide out in the cave with their cat god altar, or simply wander the forest? The two of them must have been careful when choosing victims, because despite the hundreds of missing people their crimes must have caused, there was never a full-blown investigation made of the island. Certainly Beau, the undercover police detective, was working on the case, but he had only been doing so for a couple of months. As suggested in my other video, Simone and Lena could have been leaving the island during the 11 months without the Harvest Moon to kidnap innocent people, dragging them back to Moonscar Island to drain them. As cross-country serial killers have learned, it's a lot easier to get away with dumping a body when it's 6 states away from where you picked up the victim. Simone and Lena still made plenty of mistakes. By making a wax doll of Beau, it was obvious they were planning on making him one of their victims. What did they think would happen once people realized he was missing? The police would be swarming at that point. It's not like Moonscar Island was in the middle of international waters. It wouldn't take much convincing to get a judge to sign off on a search warrant, and digging up the island would make John Wayne Gacy's crawlspace look like a backyard pet cemetery. Then again, it's likely Simone and Lena didn't know Beau was a cop, so while it would have been a mistake, at least it would have been understandable. Let's look at how the villains disposed of their victims. Everything we see on screen gives the impression that drained bodies were either buried in shallow graves or merely dumped into the bayou. I suppose that's fine if the place is deserted and the likelihood of a search is slim, but it still shows a very sloppy approach to murder. I'm actually surprised that there were corpses to be resurrected as zombies in the first place. The bayou surrounding Moonscar Island is rife with scavengers, in particular alligators. Any victims eaten by one would never be found, as their bones would have been digested. It's possible some were consumed by the huge reptiles, but you'd think more or all of them would have been. Neither Simone nor Lena appeared stupid. Feeding their victims to the alligators seems like a no-brainer. Is it possible that the desiccated corpses weren't considered edible by the alligators, who ignored them like they would a floating log? It's clearly not a case of bodies being eaten then passed through the alligator's digestive tract, as the victims' clothes were tattered but mostly intact. Is it also possible that this lack of care exhibited by Simone and Lena when it came to disposing of their victims' shells led directly to their downfall? The way zombies manifest in this film is confusing. The ghost of Moonscar the pirate carves a warning to the gang in the wall in Simone's kitchen, so at this point he is absolutely incorporeal. However, later on, his spirit seems to take over the bones in his grave to transform into a zombie, reconstituting some dried flesh as well, possibly to hold the bones together and provide muscle tissue in order to move. Between ghosts, zombies, voodoo dolls, and lycanthropy, we're dealing with a mishmash of magic here, but nothing in the film explains it. It would have helped a little had the writers included a line in the script saying something like how many civilizations felt the harvest moon is a sacred night like Halloween, where spiritual power is higher. After all, if Moonscar the pirate could have become a zombie capable of attacking Simone and Lena at any time, why didn't he do it at least once during the previous 200 years? It can't be because his bones were buried and his ghost couldn't possess it, because what about all the other dozens of zombies on the bayou that just start popping out of the ground and water? Here's where my theory about Simone and Lena's mistake of using a shallow grave comes into play.
Morgan Moonscar. He was the cause of all of this.
Moonscar the pirate is rightly blamed by the cat creatures for being the instigator of the curse. After all, his orders to murder the cat worshipper colony are what set events into motion. An argument could then be made that his spirit and/or remains are the catalyst for the entire curse plaguing the island. Perhaps the magic that called the spirits of the deceased back to their bodies to raise them as zombies was dependent upon Moonscar's bones being hit by light on the day of the harvest moon. It certainly looks like that's what happened in the film. No zombies appeared until Moonscar was resurrected, and that didn't happen until his bones were disturbed by Shaggy and Scooby. Granted, it wasn't moonlight that triggered his change, but as it was light on the same day as the harvest moon, I say it's close enough. And once moonlight bathed the bayou, that's when the entire zombie attack occurred. If this theory is valid, it stands to reason that had Simone and Lena buried Moonscar's remains deeper, or even destroyed them entirely in a fire, the zombie uprising may not have been possible in the first place.
At least Scoob and Shaggy are still free. Maybe.
I heard that, Fred. We didn't even bother making wax dolls of them. A waste of time and magic wax.
I'm no Baron Samedi, so I don't know what magic wax is or how expensive it is to make. It's probably an invention of the Scooby writers for this film because traditional voodoo dolls are primarily made of cloth. Also, voodoo dolls are specifically not considered a part of Louisiana voodoo tradition. Or even really Haitian voodoo for that matter, at least not in the manner shown here. As I said, just a mishmash of magic. Not bothering to make voodoo dolls of Shaggy and Scooby is just unforgivable hubris on the part of Simone and Lena. 200 years of success had clearly gone to their heads, and they forgot a fundamental rule of every criminal enterprise. Cover all your bases. Had the villains bothered to make voodoo dolls of all their victims, Shaggy and Scooby could have been left immobilized in the middle of the bayou for Jacques to suck dry at his leisure. I probably could have found a better way to say that. Still, when all is said and done, Simone and Lena did carry out their immortality murders for 200 years, and it's hard to argue with success like that. Even if they stumbled in the end, I think this plot still deserves a healthy 4 out of 5 for the operation. This leaves the cat creatures with a final due score of 3.7 out of 5. Zombie Island is my favorite standalone Scooby film, and I went into this expecting a perfect score. But sadly, the more thought I gave to Simone and Lena's villainy, the more doubts started creeping into my head. Last minute shout out to my brand new Patreon supporter, Kaiju Master. Thank you, Kaiju Master. And thank you to everyone helping support my channel. It absolutely means the world to me. And that's my ranking of the villains from Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, the first of the 4 films that make up the Scooby-Doo Renaissance. I originally planned on having all 4 films included in a single video, but the more I worked on the script, the longer it grew. I know this may come as a disappointment to some of you who are looking forward to me starting on the Scooby-Doo Show, and I promise that is still the plan. I just felt I deserved a little bit of a reward after all the time spent working on the new Scooby-Doo movies. I don't know yet if the rest of the Renaissance films will be 1 video each or combined, but however it turns out, I hope to see you next time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, there's a link to my Patreon below, but please only join if you're comfortable doing so. Don't make me break out the magic wax.